Now, you're married to someone for more than 20 years. You're in a loving relationship, yet you're told by a court that you're no longer allowed to have sex with them. That's the situation facing an anonymous married couple who are due to have their case decided by a judge in London soon. The wife has learning difficulties, and it's being argued by the local council that her needs mean that she now can no longer have the mental capacity to make consent to have sex. Well, the judge in the case has said, "I cannot think of any more obviously fundamental human right than the right of a man to have sex with his wife." Well, that comment in itself has understandably caused controversy, but this whole area is legally difficult, and this programme has learnt of scores of similar cases across the country. Well, Victoria spoke to barrister Sophy Miles, who specialises in mental capacity cases, and also consultant psychologist Kelly Rayner, who has to assess whether people with learning difficulties have mental capacity to make decisions. She started by asking Sophy Miles what constitutes consent.
Well, consent is where somebody agrees by choice to sexual activity and they've got the freedom and the capacity to make that choice. And that applies to everybody, whether it's spouses or civil partners or virtual strangers.
And when might capacity be reduced, if I can put it like that?
Well, we take that from the Mental Capacity Act. And the Mental Capacity Act sort of starts from a presumption that all of us have got capacity to make the decisions we need to make as we're going through our daily lives. And it also starts from the presumption that just because we might make an unwise decision, we shouldn't be treated as having capacity. And also it makes it very clear that you shouldn't treat someone as lacking capacity until you've tried everything to help them make that decision. So that's the starting point. And then the Mental Capacity Act provides that you lack capacity if you're unable to make a decision, and the reason for the inability is because of an impairment or a disturbance in the function of the mind or brain. And that could be long-term, such as a learning disability or a degenerative condition, or it could be very short-term, such as concussion. And then the Act looks at the decision-making process, and it looks at the information that's relevant to any decision. And we then ask, can the person understand that information? Can they retain it long enough to make the decision? And then can they use it, weigh it up, look at the pros and cons, and communicate the decision?
Kelly, you are a consultant psychologist carrying out assessments in these type of cases. How do you decide if someone can consent to having sex or not?
So the Court of Protection has been quite clear on the parameters that we use when we assess someone's capacity to consent to sexual relations. And that includes that they understand the body parts and where they go, that they understand that there are health risks involved, and that they understand that they have a choice and can refuse. So the bar has been set by the Court of Protection deliberately low so that we can promote people's right to sex and sexual expression.
And so
we are looking basically at those three areas. Do people understand the mechanics of the act? Do they understand the consequences? And do they understand that they can refuse if they wish?
And if someone doesn't sort of match all three of those criteria, then they're seen as not being able to consent to sex?
At that time, yes.
At that
but
time.
we would do everything we could to get that person to a point where they could achieve that low bar.
Understood. Why is this particular case different?
For me?
Yeah.
Well, we're looking at a relationship here that predates the introduction of the Mental Capacity Act. So we've got two people who are in a marital relationship, a sexual relationship. They both wish to pursue a sexual relationship with each other, yet when we apply the low bar of sexual capacity, the woman is failing to meet the standard. So we've got a clash of legislation here, the Human Rights Act, which promotes her right to private and family life, and the need to safeguard vulnerable adults who lack the capacity to consent to sexual relations.
OK, and so, Sophie, with those two bits of conflicting legislation, the judge has to decide what has supremacy.
Well, the judge will have to look at capacity at the final hearing, and it's obviously really important that he does that and that he gathers all the evidence and that he hears from all sides, including representations from the legal team for the woman concerned. And he will have to, and once, if in fact she does lack capacity, then the question, and Kelly sort of alluded to that, is, well, is there anything that can be done to help her? Can she regain capacity? Will psychological input help that? But fundamentally, if she is absolutely unable to consent, and there's no possibility of her regaining her capacity to consent, then the law is very clear, and the criminal law is very clear, that she can't give a valid consent. And unfortunately, that would place her husband at risk of prosecution.
Of being accused of rapist?
Or other sexual offending.
So do you understand the quote from this judge, which has caused outrage, which was, there is no more fundamental right for a man to have sex with his wife?
Well, that's a snippet, and I haven't heard the rest of what was said. And just today I saw it quoted again with another bit of the sentence. So I really wouldn't want to read anything into that, the way in which that was expressed. I'm sure what he's intending to get at is the fundamental human right of both parties to have a consensual sexual relationship, and the incredible importance of making sure that you investigate whether the person can consent and do what you can to help them gain their capacity if for any reason they've lost it.
And Kelly, finally, in this case, the case that's hit these headlines, what will the judge ultimately have to decide?
I think the rulings in the Court of Protection so far have made very clear that we need to be protecting people from a real risk of significant harm. So the judge is going to be looking at what harm is going to come to this woman should that relationship continue. It's a little bit more complicated than just whether she has or lacks capacity. It's all of the safeguards that we need to put around her to make sure that she's protected.